I slipped into their house through the side door, greeted by the soft clink of crystal in the dining room. My mother's roast simmered in the oven, cinnamon and rosemary hanging in the air. Early in the meal, my father cleared his throat and beckoned me to stand beside his china hutch, its glass doors showcasing wedding gifts I'd helped pay off. The flicker of the candles reflected in his eyes when he leaned in close and asked me to buy Lila a car. His voice cracked like a snapped branch, the gentle dinner chatter around us fading into an accusing hush. I swallowed, glancing back at Lila's place at the table, her untouched salad, fork resting in a perfectly folded napkin, proof she was expecting the same indulgence as our cousins, who had already laughed about summer road trips and convertible adventures. I tried to explain with steady words that I'd just covered the roof leak they'd wrestled with all spring, that my own savings were stretched thin after sending support for Mom's lingering medical bills. But Dad slammed a palm against the cabinet, rattling the delicate tea set inside, and hissed that I was ungrateful, too proud to lift a finger for my sister. Across the table, Lila stood so abruptly her chair scraped the floor, her dress rustled as she stumbled backward, eyes red as she accused me of never caring for her. I'd spent afternoons driving her to college interviews in a car I'd rented, waited nights beside her when a sudden fever left her curled on the couch. Yet here she was, tears carving rivers through her makeup, shouting that I had always chosen my own comfort over her dreams. Mom rose, stepping between us, her soft perfume of lavender and vanilla mingling with the roast smell. She pressed a shaky hand to Dad's arm and whispered that I should simply agree, promising they'd discuss it later. I watched her expression, tight lips and fear in her eyes, as proof that she understood both sides, torn between protecting her daughter and preserving peace with the man she married. Without a word, I gathered my coat from a nearby hall tree where I'd left it at the start of the evening. My leather jacket felt heavy against my arm. As I walked past my stunned cousins, Forks paused mid-air and out through the front door. The snap of the storm door echoed behind me, and I felt the weight of their silent judgment settle in my bones. In the cold air outside, headlights from passing cars cast fleeting headlights across the driveway. I made no move to return until morning. When my phone buzzed, it was Dad's name lighting the screen. His text read simply, "Don't come back until you understand loyalty." No softening words, no question, just an order. Seeing his name there, I realized everything that happened that night was real. The demand for a car, Lila's tears accusing me, Mom's pleading hush. My family dinner had laid bare all those hidden expectations, and I knew I could never pretend their version of loyalty was mine. I still remember the morning I showed up at their front porch with the roofer's estimate tucked under my arm, the paper heavy with calculations. My father stood in his paint-splattered workshirt, hands on his hips, as I unfolded the sheet listing every shingle replaced and nail hammered. My mother hovered behind him, cheeks pink from gratitude, when Dad glanced at me and said, "You've always been the one we could count on." Their relief in that moment, sighs of comfort, as I handed over the check they'd never asked for, proved I had carried more weight in that family than I ever admitted. Meanwhile, Lila slid back into the guest room, bathed in sunlight, her textbooks abandoned on the desk where my old science project once sat. They booked her weekly therapy sessions at the clinic up the road, the calendar invites popping up on her phone with gentle reminders. I knew she missed half her appointments because I found her unused Capay envelopes stuffed inside a decorative box on her nightstand, the stamps curling from neglect. When I folded laundry later, a receipt for a fancy latte and pastry from the cafe across the street slipped out from beneath her sweater. That morning coffee was her real therapy, and she never returned to the office. Then there was the car Mom and Dad, surprising her with a gleaming sedan they picked up after her casual mention of needing something reliable. I watched her back it carefully into the driveway. The first evening, the dusk light catching the metallic paint. Weeks later, I raced around the corner when I heard that crunch. Her car wrapped around the corner mailbox, its bumper crumpled and lights askew. She stood beside it, phone clenched in shaking fingers, explaining she'd been answering a text about brunch plans when she drifted into the post. They comforted her, called roadside assistance, then went inside to order pizza. I stayed behind in the chill air, watching the tow truck haul away the wreckage she'd never apologize for. My own medical scare was nothing like that. A slip in the shower that left me lying on cold tiles, blood pooling across the floorboards. I patched myself up enough to drive to urgent care, then called my father with my voice thick against the line. When I asked if he could help cover the bill, he paused, the faint rustle of newspapers on the other end. "You made your choices," he finally said, not unkindly but firmly, proof that my struggles were mine to shoulder alone. I hung up and paid the nurse with cash pulled from my sock drawer, each crinkle of bills a reminder I was on my own. Sitting now in my apartment, I spread the invoices, appointment slips, and accident photos across my desk. Mom's thank you note for the roof repair, the stack of unread therapy reminders, a snapshot of the twisted car door. These weren't abstract grievances but moments frozen in time. Their relief, her avoidance, his dismissal, tangible proof that I'd been the pillar holding us up while Lila's place was cushioned by sympathy and second chances. At last, I saw the pattern laid bare. My generosity met with expectation, her needs met with indulgence, and I knew I could no longer bear that imbalance alone. My phone buzzed as I parked beside the row of townhouses, Aunt Miriam's name flashing on the screen with her gentle panic. "You hurt Mom so badly. How can you sleep at night?" I remembered how only a week earlier, she had wept into my shoulder when I quietly handed her the repair bill I'd picked up after the storm blew our chimney. Loose proof she knew I had always been the one cleaning up their emergencies. Now, she blamed me for throwing their world into chaos. Scrolling through my feed, I saw Uncle Tom's public post, his graying beard in the profile photo, staring back at me as his words scrolled across the dull Facebook blue. "It costs nothing to care for your family. Just saying." Underneath, distant cousins I rarely spoke to weighed in with sympathetic comments, as if caring demanded an unpaid bill I had refused to foot. I thought of the summers I'd mailed checks to keep the power on, and how silently they accepted the warmth without ever inviting me inside. That evening, my phone pinged with an Instagram alert. Lila had shared a story from her dimly lit bedroom. A shaky clip showed her perched on the edge of her bed, the soft glow from her vanity mirror catching stray hairs. Text overlay read, "Some people can afford luxury cars, but won't help their own blood." The next slide panned to the dented car door she never fixed after that mailbox crash, the one I had wired money to replace, even though she never admitted fault. In the final frame, tears ran down her cheeks as she whispered, "I just wanted someone to believe in me." Watching it, I remembered the day she collapsed into my arms after a panic attack and how I'd held her steady. Yet she now painted me the villain. A chirp from my messages drew my eye to my cousin Jenna's text, sent in our private chat. "Look, I don't agree with how they handled it, but maybe refusing her wasn't kind." I could almost hear her voice soften on the phone, the way she once thanked me for designing her wedding invitation, when no one else thought my side hustle worth celebrating. I tapped out a reply. I didn't send. My kindness ran dry. Her unread bubble hovered, a reminder that even those who cared were caught in the storm I never summoned. In my therapist's softly lit office, I spread the screenshots across the coffee table like evidence, the glow of the desk lamp illuminating each accusation. She leaned forward, smoothing the crease in her notepad, and noted how my family had rehearsed these narratives for years, my sacrifices glossed over while my boundaries were cast as betrayals. She pointed out how every denial of their demands echoed the very moments I'd been silenced, the time they dismissed my idea at the holiday feast, the way they laughed off my promotion, "Because you're still my little girl," even though I was standing taller than any of them. That night, I sat against the cool hardwood floor of my living room, my back pressed against the sofa. I held each message in my hand and whispered the truth to the empty room. How I'd fixed crumbling steps, covered tuition, when Lila floundered, and shouldered debts they refused to acknowledge. Their chorus of blame, amplified across every device, couldn't drown out the quiet witness of my own history. In that silence, I found my voice again. I sat at my kitchen table, the glow from my laptop illuminating rows of transactions labeled family expenses. I clicked on the first one, and the description matched exactly the wire I sent the day before Lila's spring term began. Her college had emailed her acceptance package just hours earlier. I remembered how she'd hugged me tight, saying she didn't know how she'd have managed without that last-minute payment. A few clicks later, I stumbled on the checking account I'd assumed long closed. Its balance had quietly crept up as funds poured in. My signature, perfectly copied, authorized a home equipment financing plan. I recalled the gleaming coffee maker perched on their countertop, the one Lila bragged about on video chat, showing off its milk-frothing wand as if it were a trophy. Meanwhile, my own French press sat unused on my cramped counter. My heart sank again when I opened a PDF from the insurance portal. My name was stamped as the backup guarantor on Lila's health policy. I recalled the evening she called me, voice tight, saying her sprained ankle at the family reunion had turned into an infection and that she hoped no one blamed her for the ER bill. I had assured her I would cover it, never questioning why the hospital forms showed my information instead of hers. Then I found the email chain buried in my inbox archives. The subject line read simply, Plan B. Scrolling through it, I saw my parents hashing out whether they should tap my account to handle a plumbing leak or spring for Madison's therapy retreat. One message from Dad read, "If S doesn't have room in her budget, we'll need to lean on her again." It hit me they'd never felt the need to discuss it with me. I was a silent collaborator in every financial fix. When I confronted my mother, she sank into the kitchen chair like she'd been waiting for this reckoning. She ran her fingers over the laptop screen, tracing the rows of deposits that lined up perfectly with Lila's tuition bills. "I thought you'd understand why we used your generosity," she whispered, eyes cast down. I remembered her tears when I'd quietly fixed the broken heater pipe in their basement so they wouldn't freeze that bitter winter. My father's confession was quieter, but more chilling. He admitted that 2 Christmases ago, they'd used my closed account to co-sign a loan for the SUV they surprised Lila with, the one she totaled when she reversed into the mailbox. I'd wired money to help with the deductible, thinking it was an unexpected emergency. Now I saw I'd been the bank. That night, I drafted a formal notice revoking all permissions tied to my name. College wires, loan co-signatures, medical guarantors. I wrote to the family email thread, "I'm no longer Plan B for any expenses." My hands trembled as I hit send, knowing the silence that followed would be louder than any apology. When I closed the laptop, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The paper trail had revealed more than hidden debts. It had exposed their choice to use me without ever asking. And in that moment, I reclaimed my own story. I sat across from my attorney as she slid the renunciation papers across the polished oak desk, pointing out the clause that erased my name from the account my parents had quietly reactivated. I watched her fingertips hover over the cease and desist draft, demanding they stop tapping into my identity for every plumbing bill and car payment. When she printed the family-wide statement, I saw line after line of annotated bank slips, my mother's dental surgery paid with a forged signature, my sister's therapy retreat funded without permission. Seeing their misuse, laid out in black and white, felt surreal, but I knew it had to be done. That evening, my father's anger came crashing through the phone. I could almost picture him standing in the kitchen, spatula in hand, his voice echoing off the tile backsplash, as he bellowed, "You're tearing this family apart with your cold-blooded paperwork." He accused me of weaponizing a legal letter against them, all while the clink of dishes warned me my mother was trying to calm him. I reminded him gently that I'd spent years wiring money for their emergencies, and he slammed the phone down before I could finish. Later, a 6-minute voice message from my mother arrived. I listened in stunned silence as she choked back tears, her voice cracking over confessions that she felt abandoned, that I'd chosen form over family. Between her sobs, I heard her clutching the phone, the soft rustle of her sweater against the receiver, as she begged me to reconsider. I pressed pause and replayed the message, each time steeling myself to remember that boundaries weren't cruelty, but survival. Then came my sister's text, "Just know I'm cutting you off completely. You were never a real brother." The words glared at me on my screen. I envisioned her curled on their living room sofa, tears staining her cheeks, as she typed and hit send. It stung that the girl whose tuition I'd covered and whose car insurance I'd quietly renewed could erase me with a few keystrokes. That night, I opened my laptop and drafted a LinkedIn article called "Boundaries Aren't Betrayal." I wrote about documenting kindness with receipts and protecting one's well-being without guilt. I included the story of sending that cease and desist letter and how freeing it felt to reclaim my name. Within hours, colleagues and strangers messaged me, sharing their own tales of setting limits: a former teammate who refused extra weekend shifts, a friend who stopped co-signing student loans. Each comment, "Thank you for giving me words. I needed this permission slip," made me realize I wasn't alone. When I closed my laptop, the room was quiet except for the hum of the night air conditioner. My attorney's office felt miles away, but the weight of those printed pages lingered in my backpack. I'd drawn a line in legal ink, and though it cost me the warmth of my past, it opened space for the respect I'd always deserved. I dug out the spiral-bound notebook I kept when I was 8, and flipped to a page where I'd scrawled about the time Lila left our class picnic early because she'd forgotten her favorite toy. Instead of comforting her, our mother had snapped at me for letting her down, and I'd written, "I'm always at fault." I remembered carrying her uneaten sandwich home, tears blurred on the page, convinced I'd somehow caused her pain. That memory resurfaced as I traced the faded ink, proof that my childhood was peppered with moments where I absorbed blame meant for someone else. Last week I called my ex, and his voice trembled as he confessed, "I loved you, but every family dinner felt like walking into their bank lobby." He recalled their hushed conversations after I left the room, references to her deep pockets, and "she'll cover it," as though I were nothing more than a wallet on two legs. His recollection of the night I paid for my sister's overdue rent, then ate cold pasta alone in my car because I'd missed my own date night, still stung. His words confirmed I hadn't imagined the financial strings attached to every interaction. On a quiet Saturday, I uncovered a letter from my college admissions office tucked into an old portfolio. The letter, addressed to me, offered need-based grants and encouragement. Beneath the official header, a gentle reminder asked for my parents' signature on the aid form. I remembered begging them to sign. I recall their distracted faces and the excuse that they were too busy. The form remained blank, leaving me to juggle textbook costs and part-time work through my final semester. Holding that crisp paper, I saw the tangible evidence of the promises they never kept. In my therapist's softly lit office, I began EMDR sessions. As she guided me through the eye movement exercise, I revisited my own rage, like the time I discovered they'd spent my support money on another kitchen remodel while I lived with a moldy ceiling in my bedroom. I recalled the tightness in my chest when the therapist's tapping mirrored the relentless pressure I felt at every holiday request. With each bilateral stimulation, the shame I'd carried was unpacked and released, leaving a curious lightness in its place. That night, for the first time in years, I drifted into unbroken sleep. No nightmares of missed payments or guilt over the latest family plea disturbed me. When dawn arrived, I realized my body had finally let go of the late-night tension. My mind felt clearer, unclouded by the usual replay of texts begging for help. As I sipped coffee on my balcony, I recognized that the real cost of peacekeeping had never been my bank account, it was my sense of self. Journaling, conversations with my ex, the unsigned aid form, therapy breakthroughs, and restful nights, all proved one truth. I had been conditioned to give until I broke, to shoulder blame without question. Now, with that evidence laid before me, I grieved the family I thought I had, and embraced the harder work of reclaiming my own worth. I waked to soft light filtering through half-drawn curtains, and pause at the doorway to my spare room, where a small brass plaque reads, "No expectations." The air smells faintly of cedar from the shelf I installed, and the walls, painted a gentle dove gray, are bare of family photos, just a single plant basking in the morning glow. This room used to hold my mother's holiday boxes. Now it holds only the books and sketch pads I choose to fill it with. A few days after settling in, I posted a simple note on the community center's corkboard, "Meet up for those from controlling families, safe space tea provided." I brought over a tin of oatmeal raisin cookies warm from the oven, and by the end of that evening, 6 strangers had shared details of their own family betrayals. One woman passed around a crumpled text message screenshot from her sister, "Stop acting so high and mighty, it's embarrassing," while another unfolded a faded bank statement showing a parent had drained her savings without warning. When a man whispered that he'd felt relief just hearing someone else say out loud the word boundaries, I realized we weren't alone in our anger and sorrow. At the design firm where I work, I noticed Nina's eyes redden as she stared at her deserted desk each afternoon. One evening I stayed late, making chamomile tea in the kitchenette, when she finally confessed that her fiancé had texted, "I'm done." After she refused to lend him money again, I sat beside her instead of offering advice. I wrapped her trembling hands in my coat sleeves until her shoulders stopped shaking, and she managed to say, "Thank you for not making me feel stupid." The next morning she dropped a fresh baked muffin on my desk with a note, "Best Listener Award." When December arrived, The usual stir of holiday invitations left my phone silent. I declined a single card, a family heirloom passed from cousin to cousin, instead inviting my new friends to my apartment for movies and hot cocoa. Hutter arrived clutching a fuzzy throw blanket, saying, "I saved you the coziest," and Sanjay showed up with a crate of board games he found at a thrift shop. No one asked for money, only to share laughter over our mismatched holiday socks. A plain white envelope slipped under my door the week after Christmas. My father's neat script addressed me by name. Inside lay a check for $100 and a note. "Maybe this helps you remember your roots." I pressed the bill and letter between two sheets of glass in a simple black frame, my first piece of wall art to hang beside my drawing station. I'll never cash it, but each time I see it I'm reminded of how little I lost and how much I've claimed. Now my definition of family rests on those who show up without expectation. I walk past that spare room each morning, the plaque gleaming in soft light, and carry with me the proof. The group chat notifications that pinged with the savory warmth of cookies shared among strangers, the late-night cups of tea that didn't demand repayment, and the empty card slot where once a holiday invite might have been. These are real connections, built on mutual respect and kindness, forged in quiet rebellion and honest presence.